and I'm a district court judge in Washoe County, Nevada. This is my second time I've been honored to judge nationals. I'm thrilled to be here today. Judge Snow? Where did Judge Snow go? There he is. Judge Snow, I just introduced myself. Now it's your turn. You're on mute.
Hi, I'm Murray Snow. I'm the Chief Judge for Arizona Federal Court.
Ms. Waller?
Good afternoon. I'm Tammy Waller. I'm the Director for K-12 Social Studies and World and Native Languages at the Arizona Department of Education.
So, as I said, this is Unit 6. What challenges might face American constitutional democracy in the 21st century? Thomas Hobbes noted that life in a state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. How has the human condition changed over time, and how is that change reflected in our expectations of government? Please discuss, should the principles of natural rights or classical republicanism guide policy changes designed to improve the condition of all people? What are the most pressing domestic and global changes facing Americans today and in the future? What policies can you suggest to address them? And before I go any farther, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves.
Hello, judges. We are Unit 6. We are all seniors. My name is Dylan Sanchez.
My name is Helen Perez.
My name is Kaylin Rodriguez, and we are very happy to be here today, and thank you for your time.
All right, so everyone is going to take a very deep breath right now, and you may begin.
The debate between democracy and state of nature is a tale as old as time. It is no secret that humans are political beings. Philosophical assumptions in regard to human nature are the backbone of political theories on governance. Over time, compromises over who should rule and the operations of this rule were made as the human condition began to shift. Aristotle's optimistic view of happiness, well-being, and human flourishing was only possible in a selfless society, so this idea quickly began to fade. As society evolves, needs from government change with it, and compromises need to be made. When individual liberty became a hot topic during the drafting of the Constitution, James Madison merged individual liberty and government power with a republic that answers to the people but was not based on economic equality. Along with individual liberty, asking for democracy itself was at the forefront of change within the human condition and our expectations of government.
Natural rights are key principles in our democracy. They have been used as pillars when causing change in history. From the civil rights movement and women's rights movement, natural rights have been fundamental in causing change, like the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the 19th Amendment being ratified. Likewise, the principle of classical republicanism is seen in our government, since it was established to be run by we the people. Using these principles as a guide are important when implementing policies that will cause change, since they revolve around we the people and our rights. This is directly reflected in our Constitution's preamble, which sets up our government, as well as our amendments, which grant us our inalienable rights. One of the biggest changes coming is social media, yet through using these principles, we can adapt our laws to protect us from the harms that these changes could potentially cause.
One of the most pressing domestic and global challenges facing Americans today and tomorrow is the ever-growing social media. As technology continues to progress, the laws stay behind, causing a lawless-like Wild West atmosphere in our social media. With false information being more common than true information, this brings Americans with a continuing issue. With the 2020 election, we saw widespread misinformation campaigns with claims of election fraud, which is believed to have led to an attack on our democracy with the Capitol siege. Spreading false information has continued to be a problem, and these monopolistic social media companies have taken the power themselves to label what is and what is not fake news in an effort to limit false information on their sites. In the late May of 2020, former President Trump signed an executive order aimed at limiting the broad legal protections enjoyed by these social media companies to his tweets and others being fact-checked by Twitter. This war on fake news through social media will continue to rage on until we take action. Beware of false knowledge. It is more dangerous than ignorance. George Bernard Shaw.
To keep falsehoods out of the media and not allow malicious influence through social media, there must be a change. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996 must be modified to hold social media companies accountable for this deadly spread of misinformation. This act essentially protects social media companies such as Facebook and Twitter from liability of the many things third parties say or do on them. Now, news media is almost always going to be biased to either side, and anybody can post on these platforms. This can be used as a direct threat to our democracy.
Foreign nations can use social media to influence Americans in a way that would suit said nation. An example of this was seen in Senate Report 11620, in which it was believed that Russians had opened social media accounts to spread disinformation and cause a societal division in the United States. There are many ways that the United States enemies can use social media as a means of weaponry. They can coordinate attacks on the US using these platforms, feed false narratives to the people, and even use persuasions campaign, which is seen through the Senate report, in which Russia's goal was believed to promote former President Trump election in the 2016 election. If this misinformation is not stopped, we may see an even greater divide in America. Thank you.
All right, thank you. There's been some traditional international organizations that the United States has been a part of that have served us well, or in some instances, it's been determined that we should withdraw from them. An example is the World Health Organization. What international organizations do you believe that the United States should, in order to alleviate some global challenges, should the United States remain a part of?
Well, I definitely believe that we do have a very strong presence in the United Nations, and we are very present, and we do use the United Nations as a way to connect with other countries and resolve different international conflicts that may arise. And we do use this as a way to promote our mission statement of our Department of State, as well as evolve and find resolutions and even place sanctions on certain international like countries, international sanctions on countries that have done things to harm the US.
In regards to the United States and our impact on the world stage, the United States has a very large presence in the international arena. In regards to last administration pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and that is in regards to how the climate crisis around the world. In regards to how the United States should act against these international matters, it's really about balance, because the main goal is to protect what the best interest for our nation, as well as protect other nations too when we can. So as long as we continue to balance that, we can continue to protect what's best for our nation and what's best for the world as a whole.
All right, Judge Snow?
What, am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
To what extent can or should the United States facilitate and even subsidize the administration of COVID vaccinations worldwide without creating the perception that it is not serving American interests first?
So in regards to the distribution of COVID vaccinations, the United States, we must make sure that our nation and our interests and our American citizens are, of course, first and foremost in regarding to getting the distribution of vaccines. Once we take care of Americans and American as a whole in our country, then we could focus on serving the rest of the world. And I believe that through making sure what is the common good of the nation and preserving the common good of our nation through our Constitution, that we should make sure we protect American lives first and foremost, and then focus on trying to help the rest of the world.
Adding on to what my colleague was saying, as specified in our question, it specifically talks about the philosophers, and it mentions a lot about social contract. And the main social contract we have in place in our country is our Constitution, which does put our rights and we the people first, which is why it is so important that we are first and we are achieving the common good, and we make sure that we, the American citizens, are the first to be good in order to then aid other international conflicts or other nations.
And to echo what my colleague was just discussing, it is especially highlighted in our nation's preamble when we discuss providing for the general welfare, and especially how that contributes to the common good. The citizens of the United States must be taken care of before we can decide to take care of any foreign entity.
Ms. Waller?
So I'm gonna go back to your example of social media as one of the challenges. And as you look to solving the problems in social media, what types of tensions might arise between the classical Republican idea of the common good and the natural rights philosophy of the individual right?
So the individual right of free speech and the freedom of expression within social media is definitely sometimes in direct conflict with the idea of other entities interfering with our democracy. So although we do have the freedom of speech to publicate anything that we, any opinion on these sites such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we do have a kind of barrier when it comes to any foreign entity trying to influence our democracy through these sites. So it definitely is in a direct conflict because, because it becomes complicated when there's limits in place to what you can publicate on these sites, and it starts to limit our First Amendment.
And further echoing upon what my colleague was talking about, through your First Amendment, you are granted free speech that you could put on these sites. And through Supreme Court cases such as the National Socialist Party of America v. Village of Skokie, where we saw that hate speech was protected. The problem begins when hate speech begins to be echoed on these sites, and these sites are not held liable for the information that is put on them. That's what gives Americans this problem, that we continue to have information as misinformation, hate speech, and the sites not being held liable. So when we bring this problem, I believe that we must provide a solution. And that goes into Section 230 of the Communications Act, which grants these social media sites, these websites, and these internet providers a sort of, they don't have liability they're not liable for what other users put on these websites, which can kind of negatively affect the common good of America and even national security, as we saw with the insurrection on January 6th.
So switching gears from some of our conversation, tell me in what instance you believe that America should declare war?
War is a necessary evil, but always an evil. Former President Jimmy Carter echoed that statement. War is sometimes unnecessary in regards to protect what the best interest for our nation. And war may not be what we want, but if we need to protect what's best for the common good and what's best for national security, then that might be the solution. But we should, before declaring war with our representative Congress, we should focus on trying to figure out other solutions, but as a last resort, war might be a necessary evil.
So I want to take up the Communications Decency Act again. Is it fair or not fair to allow private business providers to remove content on their sponsored websites, especially if you're going to hold them liable for what's there that they didn't place there?
Well, whenever joining any social media app, you do sign terms and agreements which every user is held accountable for, meaning that every user, even private companies, are held to these terms. And because of this, the company itself does choose what can and can't be put on their web. And it is very important that we, the citizens, understand that we are in a way signing away and knowing that they are going to be regulating what we can and can't put.
So there is definitely many different regulations on these sites, but there is a clear distinction between these social media networking sites and news sites. So news sites are held to a different level of scrutiny than social media sites are, because like you discussed, they don't necessarily approve everything that an individual is going to be posting, and they are not the ones necessarily posting them. So it does create this confusion when an individual has their post taken down, when it can be marked as fake news or anything of that nature, as we've seen recently. So as my colleague was stating, in the terms and conditions that you sign away, you are agreeing that any site can take down a post if it goes against their community guidelines.
in regards to accountability, in regards to the Telecommunications Act, Section 230, it specifically grants basically autonomous. Some people even label it as the start of the internet. It grants these websites and these social media companies the ability to not be held liable for what users put on their site. And they've taken the responsibility themselves to fact check some users on their site, to remove some users' content. And that is not an abridgment of the First Amendment, because the First Amendment grants you from being able to have free speech against the government. And these people who are having their content removed on these sites are not being put in jail for their content unless it incites violence, but just if they're using their free speech. So Section 230 allows these websites and these internet providers to not be held accountable. So it's not fair to the people who could be caused damage through the hate speech, through the misinformation. So I believe that we should make sure, with the solution to this would be to rewrite or repurpose the Section 230 to make sure that certain companies can be held liable for misinformation or hate speech put on their site.
Right, good job. Well done. And now you can breathe again.
So
So
I need to
thank
disclose
you.
one thing. I'm sorry, Ms. Walker. I just need to disclose one thing. In the middle of your hearing, I had a power failure that reset my computer. So I lost a little bit of track of time, and I just need to put that out there on the record.
Okay.
But we are close.
Okay. In my internal clock, it seemed about right. Probably the participants know exactly if it's right. I thought you did a really good job. I would echo, make sure you do breathe actually and slow down just a bit in your testimony, only because Ms. Waller has indicated this previously, it takes the judges a bit of time to catch up to, so it's important that we hear every word. I thought you worked beautifully together and very evenly. I would listen. My one bit of constructive advice would be listen really carefully to the question and briefly answer that question directly, then expand with your other information that you have. I think that you are experts on social media, and which was fascinating to me. But I also think that you can expand, analogize some of the points you're making with social media to something somehow historical, to kind of just add a little bit more dimension to your social media discussion. But you knew so much about all of those aspects. I really enjoyed it. Judge Snow?
I too thought quite a bit about Communications Decency Act. I think if I were to be constructive, there's some things that you could have done to more directly highlight some of the conflict that you really did talk about, which is how in the world do you hold all these folks responsible for everything on the website when there is a great deal of content on the website without limiting the content on the website? I'd love to have that conversation with you at greater length, but of course there is a limit on the time. I thought if I were to say the one thing I thought this group did very, very well is you looked for constitutional application. That's hard to find in this category. And you found it, for example, in calling the Constitution a social compact
Yes.
for this nation, which requires that there needs to be served first in terms of vaccination. You will engender debate on that all the time, but in terms of knowing what the categories are that you needed to hit, I thought you did a very nice job of finding a number of times to hit that category. So that's one of the things that I noted very positively about your presentation. You did a nice job.
Ms. Waller?
I echo my previous judge's comments. I really, I love the way that you pulled in some court cases, some constitutional application, and really hit on that idea of the importance of social media and how much impact it has. The one thing that I would have liked to see, the only thing that I could say about that is just maybe see some tension between some different viewpoints on it, because it is a big contentious issue in terms of how you believe it should be dealt with. So it's okay to expand a little bit in the follow-ups to look at, you know, some of that tension a little bit more. But I thought you guys did an excellent job and I really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot from your presentation.
Thank you.
Good luck to you all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, judges. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you and good luck. And it's okay for you guys to go ahead and leave and go on to your next one because I'm pretty sure that we're a little bit behind schedule now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, judges. Thank you, Shane.